Toriel, who's right here at Berkeley. And what they did was they had 3 and 4-year-olds judge either what they called intrinsically moral violations, things like hitting or pushing another child or teasing them, doing harm to someone, basically, versus conventional violations, things like hanging up your coat on the wrong hook or putting a toy in the wrong place. And they asked children 2 things. Just one was, how bad would it be if you did these things? But even more interestingly, they said, how about if everybody else thought this was okay? How about if your parents and the teachers and the school all said, in this school it's okay to hit other children? Would it be okay to hit other children or not? How about if everybody, your parents and teachers and everybody in the school said it was okay to drop your clothes on the floor instead of putting them in your cubby? Would it be okay? So they asked about both moral and conventional transgressions. And what they discovered, first of all, was that children thought that the moral transgressions, the ones that were really about hurting other children, were worse than the conventional transgressions. But it's worth pointing out that they thought the conventional transgressions were wrong too. So they thought it was wrong to drop your clothes on the floor instead of your cubby, but they didn't think it was as wrong as pushing or hitting another kid. And the differences between genders here actually aren't significant. But here's the really interesting thing. How about the question about would it be okay if there was no rule? Well, when they asked that question, then very strongly children said, both 3 and 4-year-olds very strongly said it would not be okay for the moral transgressions, but it would be okay for the conventional transgressions. So if everybody agreed that you didn't have to have the rule about hanging up your clothes, it would be okay if you didn't hang up your clothes. But if everybody agreed that it was that hitting children was wrong, then it would not be okay to it would still not be okay to hit children. Now, the way that Turiel and colleagues talked about this was there's a difference between moral transgressions and conventional transgressions. I'm not sure that's exactly the right way to describe it. The children seem to treat both of these rules as if they were moral rules. It's really a difference between moral transgressions that involve harm, that actually involve causing harm to someone, and moral transgressions that involve breaking socially agreed upon rules. So I think you can make a good argument that children perceive both of those as being wrong. They just seem to perceive them as being wrong in fundamentally different kinds of ways. So these are really striking because they suggest that even 3-year-olds already are, in a fairly sophisticated way, differentiating between the kinds of cases in which harm is done, which they really think of as being serious moral transgressions, and the cases in which just a conventional rule is violated. So this is the sort of summary. The children are saying moral violations are more serious than conventional ones. Moral violations are still wrong, even in the absence of the rule, and conventional violations are okay as long as there isn't a rule. And what that suggested was that preschoolers were already making a distinction between the moral and conventional. They don't just reduce what's wrong to what other people are punishing, because after all, the teachers and parents are make just as much of a fuss about conventional rules as they do about moral rules. I mean, even really stupid things like don't blow bubbles in your milk, things like that really don't really make any sense. But parents get just as headed up about how important it is not to blow bubbles in your milk as they do about not hitting other kids. Children discriminate between those 2 cases, and children don't just judge wrong by externally imposed rules, as Piaget and Kohlberg thought that they did. And there are some other interesting examples there's some other interesting features of the research that Smetana and Toriel did. They gave the same kinds of scenarios to children in other cultures, for instance, children in rural Brazil and children in Burma, and they got the same results. So it isn't just that there was something about our culture that was like this. Across many different cultures with many different kinds of moral systems and conventional rules, children discriminated between the harm cases and the conventional cases, the cases that were just about rules. Another interesting thing was that, in fact, really, as young as you could ask the children these questions, you saw this effect. So even when you asked 2.5-year-olds about these scenarios, you got the same effect. And it wasn't just that children acted this way in these kind of artificial what would happen if scenarios. They actually did a version of the experiment where they sat and looked at children in the playground. And one thing that you see if you're looking at a bunch of 3-year-olds in the playground is that there are moral violations of both these kinds. So it's a pretty fair bet that some kid is going to push another kid or cause harm to another kid, and it's a pretty fair bet that they're going to break the rules about what you're supposed to do on the playground. So they actually took children on the playground right in the heat of the moment and said, did you see what he just did? Now, would that be okay if the teacher said it was okay, or would it not be okay? And even in the heat of the moment, making judgments online in the playground, children said that that the moral violations, the things like hitting another kid, wouldn't be okay and were worse than the conventional violations, like playing on the swings when you weren't supposed to be playing on the swings, when it wasn't your turn to play on the swings, for example. And then one of the most sort of heartbreaking of these findings was that they actually looked at children who were abused. So these were children who were actually experiencing abuse and cruelty from other people. And what they found was that there was no difference between the children who were being abused and the other children. So the fact that children were being harmed themselves, if anything, made them more sensitive to harm, rather than, as you might expect, making them less sensitive to harm. And again, what that suggests is that these judgments about harm are rooted in this empathic experience of imagining how the other person would feel. And in a way, for these children, when they were harmed themselves, it was as if they had an even more vivid idea about how other people would feel when they were harmed, as opposed to other children. So this seems to be something that this intuition that harm is wrong seems to be something that's very deep, and it's at least a hypothesis. So this is also the kind of judgment version of what we saw with those Warneken experiments. So in their spontaneous, this is kind of the flip side. In their spontaneous action, children are helping people to get what they want, and vice versa. When they see that someone's being harmed, that someone's being hindered, or someone's having pain caused to them, then they say that that's not actually okay. You shouldn't do that. Yeah. Right. So I'm not going to get a chance to talk about this today, but maybe I'll just put in a little blip. So let me just talk about it now. So one of the questions you might ask is, well, look, if we see these kind of intuitions about morality, why is it that kids are so brutal to each other, and why is it that adults are so brutal to each other? So if kids are so good, why are adults so rotten? And one of the other pieces that people have found is that at the same time that children are developing this sense of morality, they're also developing an ability to discriminate between in-groups and out-groups. So let me just add a slide here, because that's an important point. So you might ask, why evil, right? And there's 2 things that come out of the developmental literature. One of them is reactive aggression, which remember we were just talking about last week. So one thing that you see even in these very young children, even in preschoolers, is this phenomenon of reactive aggression, where when children feel as if they're being threatened, then they respond to that threat with aggression. So you might feel as if it's wrong to just spontaneously harm a child for no other reason, say push a child, but if the child's pushing you, or you think the child's about to push you, then your judgment about whether it's okay to push back is really different. So one piece that seems to lead to overriding these assumptions about harm is this kind of reactive aggression, where when children or adults are reacting to threat or reacting to perceived threat, then they act as if aggression in that circumstance is okay. And remember, we were talking last time about those aggressive children in the schoolyard who are much more likely to perceive other people as being aggressive. So that's one piece. The other piece, which also seems to be in place early, is in-group and out-group judgments. And this is actually work by Yarrow Dunham. And what he and other people have done is to, for example, just have children, the children are wearing a red T-shirt, and they see, so there's a pile of red T-shirts, a pile of blue T-shirts. The experimenter says, oh, okay, I'm just going to pick one of these. He puts a red T-shirt on the child, and then he shows them slides of other children who are wearing either red T-shirts or blue T-shirts. The children who are wearing the red T-shirt, even though it was completely random, say that the other child who's wearing the red T-shirt is nicer, and they would rather play with him, and he's going to be a better person than the person who's wearing the blue T-shirt. So already, and this is with 3 and 4-year-olds, already 3 and 4-year-olds are saying that this completely arbitrary thing that was just the experimenter making the decision about which T-shirt to put on you is already discriminating who are the people who are part of my group and who are the people who are part of the other group. And there are lots of experiments in adult social psychology, kind of creepy experiments where you get a bunch of undergraduates together and you say, okay, you guys are going to have red feathers and you guys are going to have blue feathers. That's all you do, and just sort them out into red feather and blue feather people and let them interact with one another. And you start seeing the red feather people beating up on the blue feather people and treating them worse and helping the people who are the red feather people and so forth. So one of the things that seems to be true is all these. I mean, it's pretty striking that all the examples of empathy and altruism are with people who are close to you, people who you identify as being part of your own group. They're not about people who are over there out in the out group. They're not about the others. So that seems to be one kind of set of natural things that are going on. But there also is some evidence that, also kind of creepy evidence, that not everybody shows this pattern. As I said, it's striking. It's in other cultures. It's children as young as 2.5. It's found in real life scenarios. It's found in even children who are abused. There's one group of people where you don't find this pattern, and that group of people is people who are diagnosed with psychopathy. And what you discover with psychopaths is that, which is kind of interesting, is it's not that they say that it would be okay to hurt people, because these are adults who've been diagnosed with psychopathy. They say it would be wrong, but they don't think it would be any more wrong to hurt people than it would be to throw your clothes on the bottom of the cubby. So in other words, one of the things that seems to be going on with people who show this kind of psychopathic cruelty and violence is that they aren't recognizing this difference between harm, that kind of empathic intuition people have that it would be wrong to harm another person, and just convention. So they don't seem to recognize that there's anything that's more wrong about actually hitting people than, say, just violating rule or violating the law. So psychopaths actually do seem to look more like Piaget's picture of what children look like, where their ideas about morality are, these are the things I can get away with, or these are the things I can't get away with, these are the things that the society says are okay, or these are the things that the society says are not okay, rather than being kind of rooted in this immediate emotional intuition that you have about how you feel when you see someone who's in pain, for example. Okay, so it is true that children seem to discriminate between these harm-based moral principles and rule-based moral principles, but it's also important that that we do have rules. And we couldn't function as a moral group or as a moral society if all we did was just rely on our intuitions of the moment to make decisions about morality. We need to have rules. Rules actually govern our behavior, so it wouldn't do to just sort of be driving down the street and think, I don't know, should I go on the right side or the left side? Which would cause less harm to the person? Right? This is not a good idea. Yeah.
I have a question. There's societies that see hurting animals as something normal, but if you see animals in pain, that these people, what happens here?
Well, I think there's some interesting evidence that what happens in general is as you treat any creature or person as if they weren't really completely an agent like you, then it becomes possible to inflict pain on them. And of course, if you think about surgeons, for example, there are circumstances in which we need to inflict pain on other people. But part of what happens in surgery is, in a way, in order to do that, you have to be thinking about that person as if they were just a body, not an agent. And there's some really interesting studies that show that even, for instance, in our attitudes towards homeless people tend to kind of treat homeless people as if they weren't completely humans with the same thoughts and emotions and feelings that other people have. And once you kind of get rid of the thoughts and emotions and feelings part, then it becomes easier to inflict cruelty on another. Or if you start thinking of them as being really part of the out group, not part of your group, but part of a group that's aggressive to you, then it's possible to think of them that way. So you can imagine contexts in which that would be true about animals, for example. And Henry Wellman actually did some of these childhood experiments that I've talked about. Remember, where that's the big database that has all the things that children just spontaneously say. And he found that even 2 and 3-year-olds already had ideas about how rules worked, about the things that you were obligated to do, the things that you were allowed to do, the things that you actually had rules about. And Paul Harris found that children were very good at judging violations of rules. So if you said something like, Sally has to wear a hat outside, and you showed the children 4 different pictures of Sally in various conditions, inside with a hat, inside with no hat, outside with a hat, outside with no hat, the children very quickly said, okay, Sally has to wear a hat outside, then when Sally's outside with no hat, that she's doing the wrong thing. And interestingly, if you just asked this as a kind of logical question, so you said something like, oh, the wind blew off Sally's hat, is Sally wearing a hat outside? Children had much more trouble answering these kinds of questions. So if you said, does Sally wear a hat outside, and gave these different options, children had a hard time thinking through that. But if you said, Sally has to wear a hat outside, then they could think through the options more effectively. So as a sort of summary, what you could think about is that there's really 2 pieces to what we think of as morality, which I think of as being love and law. And the love piece is a piece about being able to empathize with other people, see how other people feel, understand what they're like, and in particular, treat other people as if they were intimate, as if they were close to you, as if they were like your children or your parents or someone in your own family. That seems to be the place where this empathy and altruism kind of has its roots in those close, intimate relationships. And then the other piece is the piece about, well, okay, we don't just live in our close, intimate relationships. How do we regulate morality for an entire society. And that's where these principles about law and principle and things that you're not allowed to violate seem to come in. And from very early on, children seem to have intuitions about both of these. But I think one of the really interesting things is that very often when you look at changes in the law part, changes in our social conventions, they're actually motivated by these empathic kinds of reactions. So I actually have a column in the Wall Street Journal this week about gay marriage, trying to make this point. I think gay marriage is a really good example of this. So what you see with gay marriage is that as people get to know more and more gay people, and as they experience more and more gay relationships, see more and more gay families, then their idea about how the rules of marriage should work really changes and transforms. So it's not really that the reason why attitudes about gay marriage have shifted so much is because a bunch of people went in and made arguments about why it was better to have gay marriage than not, although that wasn't completely irrelevant. The thing that really seemed to have made the difference is that more and more people were in close, intimate relationships with people who were gay, who were watching people who were gay, who were meeting gay families' children. And when you did that, when you could then empathize with, well, what would it be like for me if I loved somebody and I had children with them and I couldn't get married, then that really is the thing that propels the idea that you could and you should change the rule. So this kind of balance between our medium empathic intuitions and the rules seems to be one of the things that allows for this kind of cultural evolution where we can change what we think as we go on. Okay.